Hello, everybody. Hi. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the RISE panel, sponsored by ES Broadcast. For those who don't know about RISE, RISE is an advocacy membership group aiming to support women in the broadcast sector and the screen industries. So we aim to help and encourage gender diversity and gender diversity and the gender balance in the screen industries. We do this by running events. We have a mentoring scheme in US, UK, and Singapore as well. And we also have an education program as well, which is new, and we support children and kids in primary schools, secondary schools, and also in UTC technical colleges as well. So we also have a RISE zone over there. So please join us and come and introduce yourself and see how you can help us out. It'd be really good to meet you. So now I'd like to introduce our fantastic panel, who all work in the broadcast technical industries. And also, actually, all of them have worked in live TV and radio as well. So here we have Puriminder Gandhu, who's the lead from the Edge Group, BBC.
Good afternoon. It's great to be here.
We have Rosanna Prada, who is the production projects engineer at DAZN. Sorry about that.
Hello.
And we have Claire Wilkie, who is founder of Limitless Broadcast. And we have Taryn McDonnell, who's production manager at Timeline TV.
Hi.
And I'm Nick Kemp, who I run the program, mentoring program at RISE as well. So to kick off, I just want our lovely panel to introduce themselves and their background. So Puriminder.
Hi. So I work for BBC R&D, and I am the lead for the BBC's Edge Forum, which was actually named a long time before Edge Compute became a thing, so it can sometimes cause a little bit of confusion. But basically what we're a forum for a wide range of disciplines across the organisation, from the nations to the regions, everything from operational staff to production staff to architects, systems engineers. So anybody who's got any kind of interest or involvement with live production and how we make contribution and connectivity happen across the BBC, we all get together, and we also have input from the wider industry, and we discuss innovation and new technology, and hopefully by doing that within our forum, what we can do is change and influence the workflows across the organisation.
It sounds like an amazing job.
Yeah, it's great.
Rosanna.
Hi. What do? I design and build and configure lots of stuff in our broadcast environment for DAZN, who are a sports streaming app. In a nutshell. My background is live operations, actually, so I used to be in the gallery pressing all the buttons and stuff, and prior to that, I guess you could say that I have a special interest in sound.
And Claire.
Hello, hi, my name's Claire Wilkie. I'm founder and MD of Limitless Broadcast. My team and I are fundamentally driven by pushing the limitations of broadcast technology to look for much more sustainable ways of working that we can diversify across all formats and genres across live television and production. And I run the team, and I run the vision of the company. So that's what I do.
Brilliant, thank you. And Taryn.
Hi, so I work for Timeline Television, which is predominantly an outside broadcasting and facility company. So we've got lots of OB trucks, and we've got television studios. And I work between clients and technical managers, trying to filter out the information to make it understandable for all roles, so that everything can be understood from all parties.
Brilliant. Can everybody hear out there? Okay. Can we put it up a bit? Okay, thank you. Great, fantastic. Yeah, that's better.
Oh, that's better, yeah.
Brilliant. So, great. So, just going to kick off by talking about technology. So, as we all know, things have shifted a mind-blowing amount over the last 2 years. the idea of cloud working and remote working has always been there. It's always been happening, in a very probably slow to take off way. Then, of course, COVID, the pandemic, completely revolutionised the way people are working. And we want to talk today a little bit about what that technology has impacted, what that technology is, but also what it impacts as well, particularly in terms of sustainability and diversity as well in the way that we work. So to kick that off, again, I'll ask Puriminder, what are the biggest changes technically and culturally that you've seen in the last 2 years?
Well, I'd have to say that actually I'd like to start by talking about culture, and I think that generally speaking across the BBC in the last few years there's been a massive push to recognise that there are lots of women working in technical roles, and there's been schemes such as the BBC Women in Technical Production Leadership Programme, which I was part of in 2019, I think, and just having schemes like that has really enabled women that work in those roles to think about other careers within the technology sphere. So I think, really, really importantly, the BBC is very, very aware of the need to have that diversity of representation and thought in technical roles, whether that's at operational level or way up to sort of managerial and business levels. In terms of sort of technical advancements in the last couple of years, so I've been working quite closely on the rollout of 5G and the potential adoption in terms of how we can do full remote and live production workflows over 5G. Last year I was part of the IBC Accelerator project, and we managed to do a live proof of concept from Amsterdam where we were able to use drones broadcasting over 5G. We had lighting controlled over 5G. We had AI cameras that were being controlled over 5G. So the potential to make our lives so much easier, and also the creativity, agility, and mobility that 5G and wireless technology, truly wireless, low latency technology will allow us to pretty much change the way that we approach work. And ultimately, hopefully, it's going to save us money as well.
Yeah, that sounds amazing, actually. But 5G's, it's not here yet, is it? It's still got a long way to go.
No, I think what's been really interesting about the rollout of 5G is that when 4G happened and 3G, broadcasters basically became adept at using that technology. So we weren't really consulted as a vertical by the mobile network operators. And we learned how to harness that. So whether that was through the wider industry technical kit providers, or the way that we used mobile phone technology to allow us, particularly with things like mobile journalism and breaking news and user-generated content. What's really great about the whole 5G rollout is that as broadcasters, we're having those conversations now. So the standards bodies like 3GPP, 5G MAG, 5G Records, UK 5G, we're all involved in being able to define exactly what it is we need, what our ambition is, what our desire is, and we're able to have those conversations now, and hopefully we'll be able to formulate business models that actually work for us, because as we all know, we're more interested in upload than download, and currently most networks are configured to be download friendly. So if we could get to a business model, operating systems where we are able to maybe configure how much data we want to use, whether we want to channel that data for the upload rather than the download. So yeah, lots and lots of different conversations going on right now about ensuring that it's really fit for our purpose and fits our ambition and enables creativity and that diversity of thought and representation. And yeah, there's so much to talk about.
Amazing. Yeah, I'm looking forward to seeing it all in action. I know it happens in the small test beds, particularly around some of the main cities around the UK. Yeah. But looking forward to seeing it actually happen in the wider UK. Actually.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's also worth mentioning that there are other industries that are already adopting 5G. So we've got things like medicine, so cameras in ambulances. So there's been a test bed up in the West Midlands with regards to that, so that diagnoses and treatment can be administered. So actually, that kind of critical file transfer protocol that they're using in that is definitely something that's relatable to what we're doing in the broadcast industry.
Great, thank you. And Rosanna, how about yourself with DAZN and what you've seen? Do you use 5G or is there other technical things that you've seen that's changed a lot?
I've not really had anything to do with 5G yet, but certainly the cloud stuff is kind of ramping up. I mean, as an OTT platform, DAZN has been using the cloud side for delivery for quite some time. But the rest of the broadcast chain has been pretty much like, I don't know, just like a MPEG transport stream moving around, and then any production was in baseband. So now there's like, sort of more of a drive to look at using cloud compute for doing the sort of virtualized production and transmission and that kind of thing. It's something that would be really useful for an OTT company, especially because like you're looking at like a event per event basis, and having like basically like kit sat in a data center all the time doesn't really then look as efficient, cost efficient, cost effective, when you're not, maybe like the bulk of like our usage is going to be like across the weekend, but then you've still got to have all that concurrency just sat there doing nothing. So I'm really looking forward to doing more of that, definitely.
Fantastic. And Claire, at Limitless Broadcast, what are the biggest things that you have seen that's changed in the last 2 years?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think over the last 4 years, there's been a real kind of shift in terms of not just in sports broadcasting, but also in live television, such as entertainment shows, Strictly Come Dancing, for example, and documentary making, and factual programming as well has really shifted to looking at how remote production, how untethering of cameras can really help with storytelling, and actually sort of using the technology as part of the narrative, as part of a documentary or a part of a live series. So how actually, if we, how do we want to spy on our family 24/7? How do we do that? So actually the technology really comes in to the fore there, and it's actually what we need is untethered cameras going out from an MCR, an OB, or a production hub, and following contributors around in real time. And the director is asking, okay, I want eyes on my contributors 24/7. So actually, as technologists and engineers, how do we make that happen? It's through 5G, 4G, and using remote production, but really thinking outside of the box, to use the cliche. And that is really, there's been a shift happening over the last few years, since before COVID. But it's kind of thinking about, okay, taking the technology that is always growing and shape-shifting and being engineered and really pushed, and actually how can we use that across all formats and genres and all aspects of storytelling, and empowering our content creators to do awesome things.
Great, yes, that's interesting. And have you seen a lot of different formats and coming out a lot? Is that constantly changing?
Yeah, I think so. So there's, I think it's still relatively new, because I think as an industry we're quite risk averse, and obviously it has to be controlled risk and managed. And so we have R&D and development teams, and Limitless. At Limitless we have an R&D team, and we're looking at what's out there and really trying to push the boundaries. But also, so for example, with Strictly Come Dancing last year, it was a case of okay, the live shows can't happen. So what? Strictly can't happen? Strictly needs to happen. It's a BBC One primetime Saturday Night Live show. It has to happen. It can't not. Even in a pandemic, like, how do we make this happen? So what they did was they actually thought, right, what we want to do is produce 4 specials in lockdown. How do we do that? All of our contributors, all of our pro dancers, our celebrities are locked down in countries all around the globe. How do we do that? Okay, so we look at untethering cameras. We look at the kit that we can use to take live feeds from each of our contributors and still work with them. So during like an 8-hour day, we could be filming in 5 different countries at the same time, and gathering content and building a show through that, and through archive footage as well. But being able to remotely interview contributors, go through dance routines, that sort of thing, has, I mean, it was a real game changer for such a high-end entertainment show. But they really kind of, they pushed the bar as to what was possible.
Amazing, yeah. So it feels like, you know, connectivity is really key, isn't it, in making this all happen, and you know, people having to shift and change and.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the more that you know, BBC Studios or ITV, though, you know, really kind of like high-end content creators do it, the more it will become normal, and the more people will be like, actually, let's get out of our comfort zone and really see what type of content we can create. How can we be imaginative in what we're doing and be sustainable?
Yes, great. Well, we'll talk a lot about sustainability a bit later. Thank you. And Taryn, at Timeline, what are the big changes, and how have you worked over the last 2 years particularly?
So in late 2019, I actually went on maternity leave. And prior to the pandemic, you know, we did do a lot of remote broadcasting, remote OBs, but there was always a little bit of reluctance from crew and productions. Like, you know, Claire's right, people need the confidence that it's going to work, because you're only as good as your last OB. If it goes wrong, people aren't going to want to do it anymore. So, you know, we were doing footballs, we were doing a bit of sailing, but the high-profile OBs didn't really want to go there yet. And, you know, 4 months later, the world closed down, and then there was a massive call for how can we get OBs on the telly and give people their Saturday afternoon sport. And there was a massive shift in people's wanting to find a way to do it. You know, the broadcast industry were lucky because they were counted as key workers, so they could go out and bring people Saturday night entertainment. And there's now a massive willingness within the industry, from production companies, from crew. People want to do it now for, like you say, the sustainability of it. In some ways, it's easier getting an OB. You know, the Euros, we did a lot of remote production for the BBC. Remote presentations were all done remotely, over the summer. So, and that was, in a way, a lot easier to sort out a few crew going to Europe during a pandemic when people have to move about and quarantine, and having to send, you know, and all bells and whistles OB. You can be sending 30, 40 people to a big OB. Logistically, it's a nightmare. Normally, so I do think that people are beginning to think it's an easier way of working.
I actually think that's really interesting, because one of the themes that's come through very strongly whilst working on the IBC Accelerator projects, that, you know, for operational staff, as we all know, having been in those roles, it has a massive demand on your work-life balance. And if you are trying to raise a young family, being away potentially for days or weeks, and then, you know, again, coming back to the sustainability point is that by simply not having physically as many people travelling, obviously we're doing good work in the environmental impact areas with that work as well. So yeah, there's been loads of sort of side benefits to the pandemic and the push towards remote production.
Absolutely,
that
yeah.
Possibly we wouldn't have considered. I think, you know, the importance of people's welfare, mental health, ability to maintain that work-life balance is something that shouldn't be sidelined.
I do think that over the last few years, that mindset has really shifted, actually, and the technology has enabled that completely, and particularly what we're seeing here with, you know, the way that you're managing the OB trucks, with the way that you're, you know, doing the remote production and the connectivity. It all enables that. But actually, more importantly, is the mindset, isn't it, of the people and the leadership and the companies, and acceptance of changing the culture.
Yeah, I think it does make it easier to have those conversations with management about, like, oh, can I work from home today, or oh, I need to be in just to be here for this delivery, or that kind of thing. It makes it sort of feel a bit more like approachable as a subject.
Yeah.
And I think also, as a group of women sitting here discussing this, let's not forget that actually, giving women flexibility to make choices about when they want to work and how they want to work, and not actually limiting their choice about what kind of work they want to do. And absolutely, we're in a time where we really need to encourage more women to be represented across the broadcast industry, from sort of operational right up to senior management levels. And hopefully, this more tolerance of the flexible working is going to enable women that potentially might have thought, okay, I'm starting a family now, I can't be on location for 3 days straight because I've got childcare issues. Well, you know what, actually, maybe I can just be at home with my Surface and be able to do my vision mixing or whatever else it might be. So, that again, I think is another added benefit.
Excellent. And what are the gaps? What are the gaps and the challenges still? This is sounding very positive, but that there is still a long way to go, technically and culturally. So, Rosanna.
So having looked at a lot of the sort of live production cloud stuff recently, there is a bit of a gap where I'm seeing. A need to kind of do this sort of distributed kind of control of these systems. So where you've got like the vision mixers and his house in London, and you've got the sound guys in his house in Cornwall or something like that. But in terms of like the control of like say like the sound stuff, especially, I don't feel like it's like what I've seen so far is like even remotely comparable to the user experience that you would get as if you had like a desk in front of you with all the buttons and with the touch screen, so you can go to like, this is really niche, but like to go from to really quickly make those changes. It doesn't feel like there's that sort of gel between like a user interface on those systems and a control surface in front of you. And I'd like to see like a real drive on that side, especially in the broadcast side.
Yeah, I mean that could be that we're still working towards sort of massive edge compute systems that will allow all of that sort of rendering and stuff to happen a little bit closer, rather than going via the cloud and then the round trip, etc., etc.
And how about Limitless broadcast? Are there still a lot of gaps?
I would say probably I'll talk from the cultural aspect, and actually what we're seeing is when we're talking to clients, when we're talking to production companies and production companies who don't necessarily know about remote production, or actually the technical understanding of what is actually involved in it. There's an element of education that needs to happen, and so building a confidence in clients and production managers, executive producers, that actually this is the technology that's out there. This is what is happening. This is the exciting stuff, and it's actually, this is what the technology can enable you to do. And that's where the ideas come from. That's where the pushing the boundaries comes from. That's where executive producers get excited. They're like, oh gosh, we never knew that. We didn't know we could do that. Why has no one told us? And so it's actually half of our job is engineering teams and research and development teams actually saying, yeah, this is possible. And yes, it can happen, and it can happen in a controlled way and be successful. What I say to my clients is just how big is your imagination? Because if you think of the biggest thing you can do, if you want to stream from the top of a mountain, if you want to go to Antarctica, that sort of thing, the technology is there, and it's being developed, and it's being pushed, and it's being grown. So it is successful, but your ideas are possible, and that is what I personally get really excited about. Is actually just there's so many things that can be achieved, and so many things that are outside of our comfort zone as an industry. We can be really leading the way in some of these huge creative ideas that are still yet to be realised.
I mean, I think we were talking about this before we came to sit down with this panel, and like, there's also issues around workflows. So Absolutely. Current workflows, we don't just want to lift and shift those up into the cloud. Like, now is a brilliant opportunity for us to really needle down and discover what would be more efficient. And as we all know, people don't like change, and it's about how we manage that change and bring people along on that journey and enable them to kind of, have that moment where they get to explore and innovate and find solutions to the problems or, maybe not problems that we find ourselves currently in.
Challenges.
So,
yeah, it's a really good point. And it's there's two things here, aren't there? There's about education and upskilling and training the workforce that you have already in these new technologies, but also getting in new energy. So, Taryn, what happens at Timeline TV in terms of how do you...
So we are very conscious of the fact that we need young, enthusiastic people to come up the ranks and learn the skills for them to, to continue this great remote production life we want to live. So at Timeline, we have a graduate program where we take on people just out of university or college who are keen to learn. So I think since it's 2017, we've taken on about 30 graduates. We didn't have any last year because of obviously the global pandemic, and it's actually been a really successful scheme. We know the people who we have now are we consider them senior engineers. They are so enthusiastic about new projects we've got going on. They're really keen to learn new things. Where I think historically maybe some of the older generation were quite set in their ways. Whereas now there's a need for one, and I think by them alluding to this new technology, it does get that older generation excited about it too. And, so there's a lot of crossover with work and learning from each other. So the young learn from the new, and the new learn from the young. And as a company, we see that as a really important way to maintain a high level of remote production for the future.
Yeah, that's a really good point. About keeping that knowledge in the company is absolutely vital, isn't it? And learning.
I was going to say a few years ago, I think there was quite an age gap between the people who had come up through the ranks, who had all the knowledge, and then, bless them, they're going to retire. They don't want to be working, like you say. They've got a work-life balance, and there was quite a significant gap between people who wanted to do that, and so we are now learning from the older generation as well, which is great.
It's something that I've kind of talked about before, and it's that certainly when I was very young and entered the industry, pre-digital, we were still editing on quarter-inch tape, and there was definitely a culture amongst older men in the organisation where they would ring-fence information, and they were unwilling to share it because obviously they were protecting their...
They were scared for their job.
Yeah, exactly. So for me, the internet has been a massive democratization of that knowledge and information, and actually no one can stop you from learning what you want to learn and pushing your curiosity to its furthest boundaries. So I think that's massively brilliant, and I think especially for women as well, because it's been well researched that as women we tend not to ask questions in an environment where we feel like we might be judged. So being able to just quietly go off and pop that in your browser and get to a point where you do fully understand it, I think has been a really, really important thing. And it's not just about female brain. We've got to think about neurodiversity in people and how other people learn and progress. But also, I do think that it's incumbent upon employers, as you say, to retain that knowledge and information. Succession planning is really, really important. And historically, with operational staff, as you know, quite often you're out in the field, something's not working the way it should, you come up with a solution to that problem. Everybody on your team knows that solution, like anecdotally or verbally, but it's never written down, and then that's where the problems start to happen.
Absolutely.
So yes, as Taryn said, the age gap thing is a massive issue, and I've certainly witnessed that in the BBC as well. So yeah, they're all things that we need to be thinking about.
Absolutely, and as you say, the internet is the world's at your oyster. But actually, we were talking earlier about discussing this. And actually, it can feel a little bit too much. You've got a lot of information. You've got loads of information out there, but actually, you've got a job to do at the same time. So how do you deal with that, Rosanna?
Wow, I mean, for the most part, it's just knowing that I've got projects to do with cloud coming up and just seeing this big iceberg of, don't really know a hell of a lot about this stuff. But I think that's kind of, to some degree, like with in a commercial environment and in projects, like you're working on projects back to back, so you have a general awareness of like what's going on in the industry and all the technologies and that kind of thing. But it's not really until you really need it that you then start doing a deep dive. But at the same time, there's only so much you can do when there's like a massive amount of information about whatever it is online, and you've got a very short amount of time to kind of basically gather as much information as you can to be able to deliver the job, deliver the project. So that is challenging. And I think as more of those kind of projects come up, then there does end up being then more, I guess in a way, more time to devote to that, because there's obviously then like a core sort of business need for that information and for that skill. Yeah, I think I think the other thing is also like you end up working with other teams that you didn't before, so like cloud deployment team and anyone doing any scripting. It's like for the most part as a broadcast engineer wouldn't be really dealing with them until now. So we've got that challenge of trying to speak each other's language and trying to understand each other and what each other's trying to achieve.
Yeah, that's really interesting. Yeah. So we've got all these things going on, I think within the company, just trying to keep it all, all that information churning around, but probably managing it and, with people with the right aptitudes as well. And
terminology is another one. So, even within like virtual production, like I've actually had this where like DAZN talked about a virtual production workflow in a press release. And I have people coming up to me saying, "Oh, are you doing like AR and VR and all that sort of thing?" It's like, no, it's completely not that at all. It's just about it's actually a remote commentary workflow. But that sort of like use of the word virtual has very different meanings like across the industry. So terminology is one we're trying to converge between companies, between people within companies is quite a challenge.
Yeah, that's certainly something that came up with our conversations with mobile network operators, that, the vernacular and vocabulary that we use in broadcast is sometimes different. And if we're trying to come up with engineering solutions and working with other verticals, then there needs to be that understanding of that language that is common. And the problem is like technology started and everyone was doing their thing, and it's become this kind of spider web of thing that's now trying to be a single point of information for everyone. And the spider web's a good acronym actually.
Really, really interesting. What we haven't touched upon is sustainability. So we've talked about moving to the clouds. We're talking about connectivity. One of the things people are doing a lot is companies are shifting to third party, moving media and their systems to the cloud, to encourage a remote way of working. But what does this mean in terms of sustainability? So are we just shifting the problem to the cloud? What are then productions and companies then not writing down their data of what, the carbon, the carbon footprint of what's happening up there? Does that count? There's a lot of transparency that needs to happen, I think. What happens, with the BBC and the Edge? What sort of work are you doing there, Puriminder?
So within R&D, there's obviously been a lot of work around sustainability and what we can do to reach our target of net zero by 2030, which the DG has announced this year. Obviously, we're all working as a globe towards the Paris Agreement for 2050, but some of the stuff that's really interesting about this, so one of our lead researchers did a presentation at a recent Edge meeting about this, and some of the stats that she came up with were really interesting, because what we have to do is understand the difference between carbon offsetting and net zero, and whether we are getting rid of our carbon offset or whether we are absorbing it. And there's so much to consider. So it's kind of like with new technology, for example, we have to think about from the supply and the procurement process all the way through. So, for example, if you look at a mobile phone, 90% of its footprint comes from its manufacture through the mining of the materials, et cetera, and only about 10% is as a result of its use on a day-to-day basis and energy consumption and whatnot. And ultimately, you know, it's the consumption of output that uses the most energy. So when we're worrying about sustainability as media organisations, there's a joined up responsibility. So it's not just something that we can singularly beat. It's got to come from the wider industry, the audience, the production companies, you know, everything about it. And with regards to the cloud, it's really, really difficult. So somebody like the BBC has many different areas that are working with large cloud providers, but we don't have the kind of granular data from those cloud providers about which section of the BBC has the biggest carbon offset. And then another really interesting fact is that as we move towards net zero, there's still going to be some carbon offsetting that needs to be done. So whether that's planting trees or wind farms or whatever that might be. As we move closer to 2050, the demand on those carbon offset programs is going to increase as well. So that carbon offsetting program is going to become possibly more expensive as we progress on as well. So there's so many like nuances to how we deal with sustainability.
Sure, there's a lot to do. there's a lot to do. Claire, at Limitless Broadcast, we're talking earlier about the interesting sort of way that you're working and the choices you're making.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think we've recently rebranded, and as founder and as the leader of the team, I sat down with all of the team and said, what is important to you? And what do we have a responsibility for? What do we want to stand for? And the answer came back, people and looking after our planet. Because we are in a climate emergency, whether we like it or not. And as a company, we have a responsibility to being part of the tribe that are leading the way in terms of changing the way we work, to be more sustainable, to be more responsible in what we do and how we do it. And making sure that we have a minimal impact on our planet and we leave a legacy of responsibility. So with that in mind, we welcomed Albert, which is the sustainability governing body across all of the productions, live production, non-live. And we said, come and assess us. This is our workflow. This is how we do things on a day-to-day basis, and also when we're working in the field or remotely. And everything we do now is fully remote. We are a remote production broadcast company. As they came in and assessed us, and now we're an Albert affiliated supplier. So that gives other production companies confidence when they come to us. They know that they're working with a green supplier. They know that they're working with a green broadcast company. And we've done things such as switch to renewable energy. When we're working with suppliers, we're looking very much at how they work, and so that we're making ethical choices and how we crew up, how we bring people into our team, and who we work with, choosing, looking at their methodology and making sure it aligns with us and our ethos.
Great, thank you. Taryn, I think we've only got a couple of minutes, but I know you've got some great stats that you work with at Timeline.
Yeah, so we worked out that if you replace a traditional Arctic lorry and tender going on a 100-mile journey, which is actually, if you think about it, it's not that far, that's 50 miles there and back. If you replace it with a smaller remote production vehicle and a hybrid kit-carrying car, you save about 4.5 or 5 tons of CO2 just for that, 10B. So and then having people work in remote hubs that are closer to them, mean that you're saving on the crew carbon footprint as well. So as a company, we really encourage people to use like public transport or cycle to work or walk to work where they can. so it's an important one for us as well, and we do realise that we need, like Claire says, it's a climate emergency. We need to do something to make sure there's a planet soon.
Thank you. I think we're going to have to wrap up, actually. That's gone much quicker than I thought. I hope you could hear us. So I think it's safe to say that actually we've got a long way to go in terms of, culturally, particularly. Technology's there. We're all making it happen, even if it's taking some time, but, we're all working on it. But culturally, I think, generally it's positive, but got a long way to go in terms of diversity and also sustainability. And, and it seems it's the responsibility, isn't it, of the companies, organisation, leaders, I think, to show that responsibility and to bring that down to everybody else, because I think everyone's doing their own little bit. So if anyone's got any questions, we're going to be hanging out in the Rise Zone over there. So please come over and chat to us. Right, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, panel. Lovely panel.